So like here's a line. Okay, is this XML or Kotlin?
It's XML.
Okay, so how would I comment something in here? Yeah, XML, HTML is XML. So you put the bracket, exclamation mark, dash, dash, right? But if I want to look at a Kotlin file like this one, and if I want to comment out this line, I'll hold command /, and it just commented it out. You see the two slashes appeared? So this is a shortcut. As you do a lot of programming, these keyboard shortcuts become really valuable because it saves you a lot of time. Instead of like typing this, that, you can highlight a bunch of code and hit command / and it'll comment out the entire block. Let me like this. Command /. Now it just comment out 2 lines. And if I uncomment it, boom. So I do this all the time. So it works the same way in Xcode with iOS Development. So it's really handy. Anyway, going back to our example. Okay, so everything compiles here. So if I run this right now, it says x is in the range. Why? Because I said x is 3, and is 3 a number between 1 and 10? Yeah. How about if it's 1? Does it include the 1 and the 10? Let's find out, right? So let's say x equals 1. Is it in the range? Yeah. Okay, how about if x is 0?
What's it going to do with 10 though, because 10's in both?
It won't work with 0.
Why do you think 10 wouldn't work?
10 won't work with 0.
It's a number between 0 and 10.
No, but it says both in 10 through 20, print x is outside the range. Oh, because it only executes the first one and then...
No. So this is important. And I'm glad you pointed it out. So how do I zoom in on this? Oh, there we go. Okay. So see this exclamation mark right here?
Oh, not in.
That means not. Yeah. So if you didn't know that, that's what it means. So the exclamation mark,
Because it was so small.
yeah. So the exclamation mark negates whatever's after it. So if you put not and then some parentheses, and you put an expression in parentheses, it'll be the opposite of that. So like, say x is a boolean, true or false, and x is true, then if I want to say if x, right, then I'm saying is x true. If I say if not x, then I'm saying is x false. Okay? Okay, so this is straightforward, right? Everybody gets one when? Let me just do one more. Let's say 12, right? And it should be outside the range, right? Okay, so everybody understands how this little snippet of code works? Okay. So that was when. Okay, for loops. So this is also super important. So in other languages, you might see like for each, but in Kotlin it's called for. And for is a way to iterate over some structure. Okay. So here, like the first example, they say for item in collection. So say collection could be like an array, it could be some other type of collection. So what is item? You don't have to define item outside of that. Okay. It gets defined here. So that's one thing that might look a little wonky. So the recording is not going to capture it on the board. That's too bad. So yeah, so collection is has to be defined somewhere else. So like say I had an array defined, and I called it collection. Then that's defined before this loop hits. But I didn't define item anywhere. So when I say for item in collection, the in is a keyword too, right? That means go through each item in that collection. But I don't have to use the word item. Item is not a keyword. I could say for, like say I had, like my collection was like cars, car objects. I could say for car in cars, right? If cars was the array or the object, okay? Or I could say for index, and then index is a keyword. Index in, and then the name of an array. It'll go through like the 0 index, the 1 index, the 2 index, all the way to the end of the array, okay? And again, this top line is a shorthand way of writing this, which is with the braces. So you have for, you have your condition, and then you have an open brace and closing brace, right? But if there's only one line, like here, then they can omit the braces. This is like a common thing you're seeing, okay? So here's the one with an array. Okay, so here they have for I in array.indices. So actually I here is not a keyword. I is a variable that's defined right here. This is how it's defined. Okay, so it's like a temporary variable that's defined. And then it's going to go through the indices of that array.
So you're saying you're not looking for I in the array?
It's looking, so what happens is, okay, you see inside of the braces, now you can use this I as a variable. So they say print array sub I. What is I here? I is 0 the first time. The second time it does this loop, it's 1. The third time it goes through it. Depending, like say, okay, let's write it out. So let me open text editor. Okay, so let's say I have an array, okay, and it's this collection of strings. So the first one is Bob, the second one is Harry, and the second one is Georgia, and the third one is Tom. Okay, so what's going to happen in this loop? If I run this code, is this it? No, sorry, this one. So if I run this code, okay, on this array, so if I said, yeah, if this was called array and I said array.indices here, indices, then it would run how many times? Like the first time, yeah, it's a 0, and arrays are 0 base, so the first one is 0. So here, I is an integer, and it's defined right here. But inside of this loop, I exists. Okay, so whatever code I write inside of these braces, I exist. Once I leave this closed brace, this last brace, I no longer exist. If I try to reference I here, if I say like print I, I'm gonna get an error. It doesn't. It's like, what is I? I don't know what I is.
Yeah.
So this is the scope, we call it. So variables can have a scope, and functions, everything. There's something called scope. So the scope for I exists between this open and closed brace. Okay, because it's defined right here. But again, just note that there's no val or var for I. It's because it's a for loop. That's a convention. That's how you can write it. Okay. Any questions about this? We're clear on how that works.
So you can't just say like I in an array. You have to say array.indices.
It's a good question. So here, because you're saying indices, the index is a number, an integer, right? But if you said like for I in some object, like if it was some type of collection, then you don't have to say index, right? Like, but it's not gonna, I is not going to be an integer anymore. It's going to be whatever that collection of things is. So
So it would be a collection object. Like would be the first
yeah. So like
object.
say again, like say I have this object called a car,
Yeah.
and I said for car in cars, where cars is this collection of cars, right?
Yeah.
Then the first time it runs, the car would be the first car in that collection.
Right. Okay.
It wouldn't be 0.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the difference. So because I specified here as indices, that means it's going to be, it's using the index of the array.
Okay, but if you run that, what will come out from your array you just made up?
This one?
Yeah, what would actually print?
Okay, so because so the first time it's going to print Bob, and then Harry, then Georgia, then Tom.
On one line.
On one line.
No commas.
No commas.
Right.
So it's going to say, yeah, and in fact, there won't even be spaces.
B-O-B-M-A-R-Y,
Yeah.
all this one big word, essentially.
Yeah, and that's
No
a
commas.
good question. Remember that for the quiz. Okay, so
You mean no
That's-
commas, no spaces?
what's that?
No commas and no spaces.
So what does this comma? What does this comma do? What is that?
That's just separating the array.
Yeah. So this comma is not part of the string, right?
Right.
The string is what's between quotes, but this array is a collection of things. So those things are separated by commas, and
No,
because there's strings, there's enclosed by the quotes, the double quotes.
you got a race spelled wrong with line 1. Okay,
Yes, I do.
run that though, so I can see that it's going to come out.
Okay. Sure. Or I mean, you can do this too, right? And because you can just go to this website, and let's see. So args, remember, is like whatever the arguments are passed in up here, okay? And when you write like any class, like you're gonna have main as your top level function, right? So here it's saying for arg in args, where args is this array of things that we're passing in on the top here, right? Now I could change this to like thing or whatever. It's totally irrelevant. I have to change it here too then, right? So don't get confused by the fact that arg in args is just args is arguments, and so argument in arguments. Like it's easier to think of it that way. But just again, this is not a keyword. This is a variable that is now available, right? So if I run this code right now, it prints guess 1 2 3, guess 1 2 3, and a new line between them. So why is it doing that? Because I have some other code down here. Let me just comment all this out. And run it again. Okay, so these are the 3 things I have. Let me also put like my name here and run it again. Okay, so for each thing in that item of things, print line the thing. Now if this was print instead, yeah. Now because of the way this works, I don't put commas in here and there's no quotes in here. But this is the same as writing it in code with it like this, okay? With the quotes and the commas, because the way this editor, this code thing works, okay? Because this is not part of the code up here. This is being passed into the function. Does this make sense? Did I run this with a print? Yeah. See, there's no spaces even, right? How about if I did this though? Print thing and a new line.
It would do the return.
See if this actually works.
You make that larger?
Okay. So, a couple of things. So, see the plus I put there? So, thing, I don't put in quotes because thing is a variable, right? If I put quotes there,
It was a security agent checking.
so if I put quotes around the word thing, then it's no longer a variable. It's treating it like a string, right? So that's why I don't put quotes here. But I can put plus, so it's just called concatenation in strings, right? So I can add another string to it. Because this is a string, I can add another string to it. The string I put slash n. Remember the slash says, oh, this is an escape character. Slash n means new line, carriage return. So because I did that, it's gonna print the thing and then a carriage line. So the next thing will print on the next line. Okay. So you get.
You put the N in quotes, not the.
Yeah, because if I don't, then it doesn't know what it is. What's a slash n? But inside of quotes, that slash means it's an escape character. What if I wanted to print slash n? Like literally, I want to print slash n.
Put 2 slashes.
Let's find out. There you go. Yep. So I escaped the escape character. Okay. Okay. So is everyone clear on like basically how for loops work? Okay. What's the question?
I guess what you're saying is, if you want to put out an array of anything, you can put any word in front of an array.
Yeah, so the way for works is you iterate over a collection of things, okay? So it could be an array, it could be some other collection type, it could be let's do this. So for a thing in args, let's say, instead of args, let's say args.indices. Now what's going to happen?
What did you put?
Is it gonna print the numbers because you're talking about the indices?
Okay. Hang on a second.
Just put numbers in the, of course, it's just one, it's two.
It's just gonna print the index number for like 0 through 4 or whatever. I guess 0 through 3.
Well, I have an error.
There's 0 through 2 in
Oh, it won't let me do this. No. What's the error? Come on, tell me my error. Problems here. There we go. Expecting an element. Oh. For a thing in args indices, print. So I did it here. Okay, so it's 12 because I put 1 and 2. So it's actually 1, 2. Let's say Bob, Bobby, Mary, and Jane. Okay? Does it make sense what's going on?
No, I can't see what the problem is.
Okay. So this is I'm doing this because of the earlier question, right? So what if, like, do you have to have this indices? So what is this saying? So I'm saying for some variable called thing in the indexes of this array. So it's going to go through the first index 0, second index 1, and so on for however elements there are. And what am I going to do? I'm going to use that index to print like the array sub the index number. Okay. Now what I could change this. Like I could do other stuff with that. Like instead of thing, let me do like thing plus 1. This should crash, right? Why would this crash?
Because you have one already, right?
No. So instead of 0, it's going to do 1 here. Because this is, right? Why would this crash?
It's gonna go outside the array space.
Yeah, because the array, if it has 3 items and I try to access the 4th item, what's going to happen? Let's try and do, let's see how this handles it. I have no idea what it'll do, but we'll find out. Okay, so we got a crash, exception thread main in Java lang array index out of bounds. Okay, so be aware of that. This is a really common like mistake people make in programming. But if you see the error, now you know it's you try to access an array of an element that doesn't exist. Okay, so we talked about for, we talked about when, and the other one is while. And while is common in lots of languages. Okay, so you have while and do while. Okay, so while x is greater than 0, do some code. Pretty straightforward, right? So that says like, what in this particular example, x is changing inside of that loop, right? So say x was 10. Okay, so is x greater than 10? Yes. So go ahead and execute the code in here. What's the code? X minus minus. Anyone know what minus minus is?
Subtract 2?
No.
Subtract.
So this is the same thing. Plus plus and minus minus do this. And plus equal. So these are operators. And this isn't a language reference again. So like if minus minus plus 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 equals, and I don't know if Kotlin supports or not, but there's equal plus. It's just the order of operations. Let's leave that one out for now. But what these does is, so if I say like x and then do this to it, it's the same as saying x is equal to x minus 1. this is x is equal to x plus 1. And this is add to x something. So like plus equals like y. And x equals x plus y. Okay? So it's shorthand. Where, yeah, instead of writing all this out, just write minus minus plus plus. So what this does is, first time x is 10, does it execute? Yes. Inside a loop, it becomes 9, right? And then 8, 7, 6, until it gets down to 0. Now, if x is 0, does it execute? No. Okay, so how about when it was 1, it did execute. So inside of here, x is 0, right? But once it hits 0, it's not going to execute this loop anymore. That's important to realize, like, the scope of that, right? Because once this condition is not met, it's not going to execute. So if I had a print statement in here, or a print line, the value of x, what would I see? The whole thing.
You would see 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Would you see
And then-
0?
No, you wouldn't see 0 because it's not gonna.
You will see 0, yeah. You see? It's not going to execute
Oh,
after it's 0, but it
incrementing.
became 0 inside here.
Okay.
So
it'll
you
still
would-
print the 0,
yeah.
but it won't.
So
Okay.
be clear on that, because again, if you see that on the quiz or exam, you know that you might have two answers if it's multiple choice. One will have the 0 and one won't. So you should realize that.
But you say on the thing, is that's, okay. You know, it shouldn't show 0 because you just said right here on the board that if this x.
Yeah. So let's think about it, right? So x is okay. Let's make it a shorter range. Let's say x starts out at 3. Okay.
Okay.
So
X is greater than
does this execute when it's 3? Yes. Okay. Now, say I do the print before or after this. Let's do that. Okay. So let's say let me actually copy this code and let's run it and see what happens. Get rid of all this. Oh, one more thing. You guys notice anything about this? There's no open and close brace. And this is in the second line. That's okay. So you could put it on the same line, or you could put it on the next line, but not beyond that. Okay? Because there's only one line to execute. So just don't get confused with that. Okay? Okay, so let's define what x is. So let's say x let's say it's a variable x equals 3. Now, did I have to put a colon in the type here? Colon int? Why didn't I do this? This is wrong because it starts with I. So remember I said that it's Kotlin is smart, right? It can infer that's an int because of the way I used it. If I said there's some variable x and I didn't get it what it is, then I have to say this, because how do I know what it is, right? But if I just give it a value right away, then it knows what it is, right? Okay, so let's make this 3. And then inside of here, let's do print line. Actually, let's do print before at first x is, and then I want to give the value of x, okay? And I'm going to use some syntax that don't know if this will work in, no, it won't work in Kotlin, okay? Okay, and then the second one I'm going to do a print line. After word x became, and then put a space here before it. So there's a space, so then print x, space, became, and x. Okay? And let's run that. Okay? So what happens here? X was 3, so when it starts running that loop, it prints 3, because I haven't done anything to x yet. Then I subtract 1 from x, so it becomes 2. Then x is 2. Is it greater than 0? Yes. So it'll run again. So it starts out as 2, then I subtract 1, it becomes 1. So now x is 1. Is it greater than 0? Yes. So I'll run the loop. So then it prints out x is 1, then it removes 1 from x, so now it's 0 inside the loop. So it prints 0. Now x is 0. Does it run it again? No. Okay? So just realize, like, when you're programming, like, what the logic is of where you're making your changes. Okay. So everyone clear on while loops so far? Okay. Then there's a do while. Okay. So do while, instead of starting with a while, you put everything inside of a do. So you have do, open brace, close brace. Okay. And then
Would do be the same as when?
would it?
When?
No. So the structure is different. It's a little bit different. You could use like the same. You could execute the same code using like a for loop, a when loop, a do while loop. But it's the order of operations and the logic. So depending on what the situation is, you use what makes sense to you, right? So here you have the code is going to be executed inside the open and close brace of the do, but they put the while afterward. So do this stuff while y is, or whatever the condition is. Here's while is not no. Okay. Any questions about this? I don't think this is on your quiz, but it could be. So just so control structures. That's, I think, as far as you get in the quiz. Okay. Anything else? You see this word a lot, lambda. Anyone know what a lambda is in Kotlin? What is this weird word, lambda? It's actually a programming term, but
No.
it may not be familiar to a lot of people.
No.
So lambda is a function that doesn't have a name. That's all. Unnamed functions. I talked about this day one on Kotlin, right? So functions, like, you could have fun, the name of it or something, but you can have what's like we call in other languages a block code. You know, it doesn't have a, it's a function, it doesn't have a name, and you could execute it under some condition. And you can pass these blocks of code or these unnamed functions as parameters. You can pass them as a value into something. Okay. What else? Oh, I think it's time for a break. I think that covers everything that I want to cover on this. Let me just check. Yeah. Anything else I'll talk about when we do the overview of the tutorial. Let me just check here. Intents, debugging, instant run, git, and okay. So for the Ray Wennerlich tutorial, if I don't get time to go through all of it, what I did is under these sub bullets, all the topics he hits on in that tutorial, I put here. So like function and lambdas, they touch on that. So there's a link here to explain what are function and lambdas. Single expression functions. What? This is 10. Isn't this today? Yeah. Yeah. So we were supposed to do the tutorial since last week. You should have done already. But all these are the topics that are touched on by the tutorial. So make sure you know what these are. List views and adapters, you have to actually use a list view. What's an adapter? What's an intent filter? How to get a result from activities is super important, because if you're doing a calculator app, then how do you get what the number is that they pushed, right? Like if they do something on your UI, how do you get that value, or how do you fetch something? If they type in a name and you want to get the value of that, how do you get that from the activity? Who can remind me what is an activity?
Just like a screen.
Yeah, so some kind of screen, some kind of view. What else? Companion objects. It's a weird term, so just know what it is. This ID let. Let's kind of interesting. We use let in Swift too, but we use it differently. But for the same purpose, like for optionals, is where you use let, and I'll talk about that later. Broadcast receivers, compile time constants, try catch. That's another type of. So try is like if you have a function that can throw an error. So you would say try this. If it doesn't work, then in the catch you say okay, it didn't work, so do this. Like throw an error or print this and give me some debug output, whatever. Shared preferences. This is the same in Android and iOS, and that is like so. There's ways to store data, lots of ways. The easiest way is shared preferences. Like on a user device, it's like the equivalent of what in web development you think of like a cookie. Like it's stored on the device. It could go away at some point, but if you want to save state or save some data, like between the time you go into your app and you go away from your app, you killed the app, come back, you still want to have that data available. You can use shared preferences.
By keeping your contacts in your telephone file.
So so contacts, you might have hundreds or thousands of contacts. Shared preferences is not the way to do that. You want to have a database for that. So like I said, there's lots of ways to store data. This is the easiest, simplest, most light way to do it. It's not a way to store a lot of data.
It's like clipboard.
Yeah, it's like a clipboard, but permanent. Okay? So, like for example, I have an app that I wrote that the user has to log in, but we don't want to make them keep logging in every time. It's not a very, we don't need a lot of security, and we don't want them to have to log in every time they go out to the app. So, to save their login, the server gives, when they log in the first time, the server gives us a token. I store the token in the user preferences.